So we're going live.
And did we hear Carmen's going to be here?
Did not hear.
The only person I heard from was Patty.
Yeah, I know Patty's out. I think Carmen's on. Just turn this. And we'll get. Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order the Parks Commission meeting for October 20th for the City of Coos Bay. We'll do a call to order roll call. Bev, would you like to start?
Beverly Myers, Coos Bay, Joshi Parkins, of that.
Coco Sutton.
Bill Davis.
Ariane Lyons.
Jennifer Wersing, City of Coos Bay.
I'm a Brunette, City of Coos Bay.
Okay. And online, I see we have Carolyn.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And Becky, I see that you've joined us as a guest as well for your presentation.
Yes, thank you. I'm here.
Okay. And did we hear from Bill Autumn? Okay. And Patty Scott, we know, is absent. So, and Sam Crowley is retired from this meeting. So we'll see if Carmen or Bill make it in. We have two. Well, we need four. We have four. Okay. Can I get a approval of the meeting minutes? We do not have them. They were not in the packet.
Well, I can suggest that we can just approve the meeting minutes at the next
And
Parks Commission meeting.
Yep. And then Emerald, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Emerald Brunette. I just started about a month and a half ago. It's the Contracts Administrative Specialist. Took over Kelly's spot. Brunette. Very helpful. So yeah, this is my first Parks Commission meeting. Nice to meet you.
welcome.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much. Okay. Are you here for citizen input?
We're requesting a memorial bench.
Okay. You're on the agenda, so we'll roll on down to you when we get there. I'm seeing no other citizen input, so we will move on from that. Moving on. And then, Cricket, would you like to present on the CLG grant?
No?
Nope. Becky?
Yes, I would like to present on it. And I apologize if there's dead air for some reason. You're coming through a little choppy, so if I don't answer a question, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's because I'm not getting that connection. But I'd just like to briefly present on this exciting CLG grant opportunity that the cemetery is hoping to apply for and would like the Parks Commission's approval and blessing to proceed with the application. You may, in your 159-page packet this month, you may not have got around to reading it. So let me just recap that the city over the past 20 years has really demonstrated in time and dollars and their commitment to managing the cemetery, which certainly not what maybe the city had thought it would be doing when it accidentally acquired a cemetery in the 1940s. But the CLG grant is a really unexpected opportunity that has come up that would allow the city and all the volunteers and supporters of the cemetery to enact really meaningful change in addressing some issues with headstone preservation. So some of you may remember that Cricket was there over the summer, or actually back in the spring, talking about the headstone assessments and survey that was done this past summer with outside contractors who were evaluating all 1,100 gravestones in the cemetery and making a plan for their future preservation and care. So out of that work in the summer, which was all funded through crowdsourced donations, there are about 393 grave markers in the cemetery that are in need of restoration and preservation. And the top 102 would be able to be conserved through this CLG grant. So this would be a project that would require limited city staff member time, and because it would all run through the single contractor. There's not a lot of people who do cemetery preservation work in Oregon, so it would be with Historic Preservation Northwest. And one thing I also wanted to address is in Greg's staff report, he mentioned the grant match. So the CLG grant is a $15,000 grant that's from the state of Oregon and administered by the city of Coos Bay. And it requires a one-to-one match that can be both in cash and in-kind donations. So we've already had a lot of communication with relatives who are interested in getting their relatives in the cemeteries' headstones preserved. So a lot of funding would come through relative donations and donations from other interested people in the city and in local area. There's also some other exciting grant opportunities that we'd look at applying for. Several other grants from the state of Oregon could be used as matching funds. The Oregon Historic Cemetery Grant, which is up to $8,000, is something that we would look at applying for in January. There's also a Preserving Oregon grant that goes live a little bit later in the spring and April. And the cemetery actually already has about $2,500 in its account. So with that, and then some in-kind donations that have already been lined up with things like exciting things like gravel that will be needed to level headstones and overnight accommodations for the contractors when they're in town. So there already is a lot of support for this project, and it would not, the $15,000 match would be in no way, the city would not be expected to contribute that. So that was a really brief overview of the CLG grant, and I'd be happy to ask questions, answer questions, or dig in further, however you would like to proceed.
The only question that I had was, how long is the CLG grant available to wait for the matching funds and in-kind to get in place and be started and finished?
So the final, the work has to be completed by August of 2023, and it's when you do that final accounting is when everything has to be in place. So you don't have to say at any point in the application stage or anything like that you have the funds lined up. And of course, if something fell through at the last minute, or you could only raise $10,000 instead of the $15,000, you could accept a lesser amount of the grant funds and not use it all. So there's no expectation that you have to have the in-kind or cash match in hand before the grant period starts.
So if you ended up with in-kind of $12,000, you'd still get $12,000.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions? Okay, and then my understanding is that we are looking for support from the Parks Commission to move forward with the CLG grant. So can I get a motion to either move forward or to not with the CLG grant?
I'd like to make a motion to move forward with the CLG grant.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Bill will second. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much, Becky and Cricket, for all the amazing work that you do on this. Really excited to see the gravestones and the repair work, and it's a really exciting movement forward.
Great, thank you so much. For those of you who didn't notice what the next steps are, it goes to the design assistance team to be considered for review, and then the city council in December. So this would be a pretty quick turnaround depending on the outcome. So thank you again.
Thank you. And as the chair of the DAT, also will support it at that as well. We will now move on to the memorial bench. If you'd like to, you can speak from there if you feel most comfortable, or.
I will tell you a little bit about my mom. I wrote it down, and I'll try not to curse. She passed, so my mom, her name is Sue Burnett. She passed away August 4th. She had a short run with bone cancer. She was the strongest, kindest, and most selfless person I ever met. So she was also a great support to the community. She had an active role in PEO. I don't know if you're aware of that group. So it's a group of ladies, sisters, that they raise money for women for their education with grants and scholarships and all that. So she's been a part of that group for some time. So she fell in love with Coos and bought her dream house here. She was a lover of nature and all God's creatures. Her last request was to have a lunch place in her native Coos Bay for all people to enjoy. And she told me it needed to be somewhere for for easy access for everyone, because she was having a hard time getting around. And we feel like Moose Park would be it's a beautiful park, and I think it would be a great place for her bench. And I just want to thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. We're so sorry for your loss.
I did bring a picture. This was 3 years ago today on our wedding day. So,
And what is your name?
my name's Linnell,
Hi, Linnell.
and I'm a nurse in the community. I work at the area hospital as well as Southern Business School.
Thank you so
And what
much.
was her name?
Sue Burnett.
Sue Burnett.
Okay.
And this is her husband, my husband.
Okay.
So,
Glad to meet you.
So today we are looking for a motion for placing a memorial bench in Mingus Park per our bench guidelines and at the location direction that we provided in previous memorial bench conversations, with the importance on making sure it has easy access, because that is an important thing. And so we're looking for a motion for placing the bench.
Before the motion, is there some communication that's going to be given to the family of the areas that will be accessible and also meet the guidelines?
Yes, so what
Okay.
we've done in the past and what our last memorial bench discussion was.
Right, we had that.
Was that there are some locations that have been selected.
Okay.
Where bench locations for the future, I believe. And
Okay.
they'll coordinate with the city and then they'll bring back that final location.
Okay.
Notify us of that
Okay.
location. If that is what the rest of the commission remembers.
Also move.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Do they know about the location, Jen?
No, they'll coordinate with the city.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it'll come back to us and, so.
I believe you'd be happy anywhere. I went to Moose Park and took a whole bunch of pictures the other day. It's just gorgeous back.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a first and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much for coming in, and you're more than welcome to stay for the lengthy, arduous next section. But we appreciate you coming in and sharing your story and your memory about your mom, and we look forward to helping you get a bench placed.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to meeting you.
We will be in touch.
And thank you for working as a nurse at our hospital. That's very important. Thank you. Thank you.
We will now move on to item number 7, the review of the working draft of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Facilities Plan. All right. Carolyn, take it away.
Certainly. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. Today, we're asking you to provide comments on each section of the working draft. The council looked at the draft, I think a week or two ago, and had some things that they wanted to see changed, which have been incorporated into this draft. The plan had been to hold a public hearing on this on November 17th, which is your regularly scheduled meeting. In the interest of time, I think Jennifer and I talked before the meeting, and if you don't get through everything today, we'd like to suggest that you hold another work session. Jennifer, I think the dates we were looking at was either the October 27th or November 3rd. So if you could keep that in mind, that would be helpful.
So I think we'll go ahead and pause now and have the second meeting discussion before we get right up to the next, to the deadline, the 5 o'clock hour. What were the...
October 27th and November 3rd, is that correct?
Yeah, those are the next 2 Thursdays. And at 4 p.m., I'm assuming that was the
That would be
discussion.
fine.
Does next...
I have a dentist appointment, but
On
that's
the
okay. I
November
don't have to be
Okay.
here.
The October one is on the 27th, and the November one, I believe, is the 3rd. Is that right, Carolyn?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is there one preference over the other? Bill, when's your dentist appointment?
4
On which day?
on the 27th.
Okay. With consensus, could we shoot for October 3rd and then message the few people?
November 3rd.
November 3rd, thank you. And ask the people who are not in attendance, and it would be 4 o'clock at the city. Okay.
I'll be missing the October 27th one also.
Okay,
So November 3rd then.
November
seems-
3rd.
Okay.
So we'll shoot for November 3rd at 4 o'clock, Carolyn? Is that okay?
That sounds good. I do have a question though. Just in case you want to give yourself some wiggle room on time, you might think about a 3:30 meeting unless the room is occupied or something. I wouldn't want to see you get in a bind
I appreciate that.
again. So
Is
just put it out there.
everyone comfortable with 3:30?
I'm okay.
I've got a house full of emergency response people coming over, so I kind of need to hold down the front door.
Okay. But you'll be able to be here on the 3rd, at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, better?
Either one.
Okay, let's do 3:30 then on October 3rd, and then,
November.
November, thank you. I'm
It's
just
okay.
not quite ready for it to be November yet.
And
Yeah.
this room's open.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and set for this room, and Emma, one of you will reach out to everybody and then also send an email reminder, so we can get it on everyone's calendar.
Okay, fantastic. I'm not going to walk through the entirety of the staff report. What I'd like to do is follow up on a discussion that Ariane and I had about taking this through a kind of a PowerPoint presentation so you guys can focus on specific pieces and parts, maybe come to some conclusions, and then move on. And Emerald's going to help me out here with the PowerPoint. I can't see it, so here we go. Somebody could.
Carolyn, we're pulling it up right now, and
Excellent.
we have
Perfect.
we have the opening page.
Great. Well, we all know what this is, so let's jump to the second page. The first part of the work here in the draft was the first chapter identified as what we're calling plan preparation. And the public participation piece is fairly short, but we're hoping to expand that to include the outcomes of what we hear at the public hearings. There's a lot of information in Appendix A from both visitors and residents through the surveys. And Coco, thank you again. You're very instrumental in all of that. And so we'd like to get some feedback on that if we can. And the next section is just the plan organization. We've identified, kind of the order of things in the plan. The big piece here on this slide is public participation. So we were hoping to get some feedback from you on your thoughts on how the public participation piece has been assembled, and anything in general that you'd like to bring up or suggest be done differently.
Do you have, maybe it would help if there's some specific questions?
Well, I drafted it, and Coco and I spent a lot of time on it, but we were hoping to hear back from the commission if you, in general, are satisfied with the public participation outreach that that was concluded here.
Honestly, I think that the amount of surveys that we got in response was impressive, given that we hardly ever get survey responses for anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
Is there any
Okay.
desire by the commission to continue with any surveys, or are we satisfied with the amount of response that we got?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think we're satisfied.
All right, let's move on to the next slide, chapter 2, the plan context. This part of the plan identifies the location of our city. There's a nice map there, and then there's also a reference to demographics. It gives a very brief overview of just kind of the bare bones demographics for the city at this time, and then refers you to Appendix D, which is a table that was produced during the 2020 pandemic, covering census information. So we think that's the best we can do right now. What if, when the state SCORP plan is completed in 2024, I'd anticipate that we'd be coming back to you to amend this plan just for that little piece. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Coco, did you have any other thoughts on that?
No, not unless anyone has any questions. We wanted to set up on our plan context and chapter 1 and 2, just kind of an outline so that when we're applying for whether it's public partner or private partnerships or nonprofit partnerships, that we have addressed the items that the state recreation plan for outdoor recreation requires, because that's that land conservation water funds that we just had come in for November, and there's a lot of different pots of money that come through that, and they're usually, if you look at the last SCORP and then what they've already outlined the coming SCORP will be, which is going to be released next year, they're looking at demographics, they're looking at the lack of outdoor education for young people in Oregon, they're looking at the aged population. So a lot of the things that have already been addressed for the last 30 years, we wanted to make sure that we touched on it here and we used as current as possible, given that we didn't have a pot of money to hire someone to go do random surveys to get you the 1,000 mark that's good, statistically significant, etc. So hopefully if someone looked at this on a grant, they can see that it was not only online, which a lot of people have some concerns about online survey monkeys because they only give you either or options. We also did outreach for people to check more boxes because once they get a pen and pencil in hand, they don't choose 3. And then they gave us information on things that had nothing to do with our park, but restrooms and showers, because a lot of people are living on the boardwalk in their boats. So those are things that will impact a lot of the projects we're doing in the future. So hopefully if something comes up and we need it for the scope of this plan, that this will cover those things so someone doesn't have to hire a new survey. So this is our opportunity to look at the SCORP outlines to make sure we're aligning with that.
I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I know that it gets pretty hefty because of all these surveys in here, but there's a method to the madness of having those surveys as a part of the document. And I think Coco just did a great job of laying out why they're in there and how they'll be used. So, okay, if we could jump to the next slide, slide number 4. This walks you through the key plan elements. These were themes that we kept hearing, in some of the comments, and these were also themes that were laid out in the 2013 plan as well. And really, they haven't changed. These are some pretty important things in Coos Bay that laid the groundwork for our park system and our trails and all the things that people enjoy here. So we have quite a bit of is taken up on this page, but the bottom line is I think we've covered this fairly well. So unless the commission feels like the draft doesn't really catch this, then I think we could probably move on. Well, I'm not hearing anything, so I'd like to ask if we could move to the next slide under plan context. The recommendations. 2.4.1 is the beginning of a discussion of all of the top parks and facilities that were identified in the plan, and I'm sorry, in the surveys. And what we did was we put them in order as to what we were seeing in the surveys. as far as the numbers. And honestly, though, we did use the Survey Monkey because the analytics on that were much tidier than what we had in place. Not all of the surveys were completed yet, not completed, but assembled yet and tabulated when Survey Monkey was done. So I think, though, that what we found, and Coco, jump in here if you want, is that what we saw in the handwritten surveys was very similar to this order of priority as far as the city parks. And what we did was, in each one of these, we identified the facility itself, the size of the facility, the location of the facility, what it offers today, and what improvements could be considered in the future. Now, the meat of this came from the 2013 plan. I'm going to use Mingus Park as an example. That plan identified like 14 or 15 different things that needed to be done. What we did was I went back to Jim and Greg and said, hey, what have we already completed? We were able to knock a number of things off the list. And then we looked at it again and said, well, if of what's left, what can be, is there anything we need to add or take away because so much time has gone by? And there were a few things. So what you see in front of you is, on that particular one, and on most of these actually, is I think a pretty good listing of the improvements that are needed down the road. And I think it's pretty thorough. One thing I'd like to point out is the commission was pretty strident about wanting to have a quote master plan for each one of the parks. And upon further discussion about that, the takeaway was you'd like to see a site plan or a floor plan in the case of a building that identifies where everything is, where we're going to put new things, etc. So what we did, instead of adding that to each one of these parks and facilities, is we created a goal and an objective related to that. It's further in the document in section 3 that I will get to pretty soon. But I wanted to point that out because that had been an important point that was driven home to me when we first started on this back in May, that the commission really saw value in having that, not only for identification of where things needed to go, but for future grant applications, to be able to identify that we've really taken each one of these facilities and looked at them long and hard. So that is an objective later on in the plan that I will get to. So when you look through this plan context 2.4.1, it identifies these 13 facilities. I guess I'd like to ask, is there anything that's jumping out at you in the review of these that you would like to talk about, change, see expanded, see revised?
I think for me personally, if commissioners would like to add something now would be great, but my hope is at our next meeting we will have all of the commissioners. So for this particular section, I would like to revisit this on the 3rd, when we hopefully have everyone in attendance, if that's okay, because this is a part that I feel that we would make some strong suggestions to.
Perfect. All right, we'll hold that off then.
And I'd like to add that on this 2.4.1, if you look at Appendix 612, which is the park survey from Survey Monkey, and if you look at this appendix, which doesn't have a number on it yet, those two things would be good to have in front of people so they can see it pretty much lines up. The top ones that people are using and interested in are Mingus Park and Pool, Empire Lake John Toppets, the boardwalk, and then in the manual one, it's the boat ramps. And in this one here, it's pretty much, the boat ramps. So it doesn't matter which way we did it. They came out, if you just picked 5 things that you focused on, that could probably keep you busy for 20 years. Mm-hmm. But I think it's good to have those, because even though we couldn't use the other items to line up apples and coconuts, it still came out when you sifted it what people want to focus on in terms of who uses things the most. Because we can't do everything at every place we want, we already know that.
No. Although I keep trying to pay that big Powerball whenever it gets real high.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do good things with it, so I think I should win. So I think if it's okay, we'll move on to the next
Yep.
section and we'll revisit this section on November 3rd.
Well, that being said, I suggest then that you also revisit 2.4.2 on the 3rd as well. That's on slide 6. Because this goes over city-owned cultural facilities. That's
Yes, I
slide number, yeah, there we go.
I think that is a good
So I think in the
suggestion.
same vein, it would be a good idea to hold off on that until November 3rd as well. That's up to you, though.
I agree. I think we should move on to the next chapter because I think that would be a good discussion for when the majority of us are here, if possible.
Okay. I would like to point out on slide number 7, if I could, the council had a question for the commission. When you started out on this journey, part of the scope was to try to include the tourism community and the visitors community, which is why we had the visitors survey. And the council really, I think they had a pretty thoughtful conversation on this, but they really wanted your feedback. Their question was, should we include these other cultural type facilities that are not owned by the city, but that are recreational and cultural in nature that people come to visit? And I think when we looked at all the comments from the people who submitted surveys back to the museum and to the BCB offices, it was pretty impressive. I mean, people come away from Coos Bay excited about our recreation and cultural opportunities. So I think that's a question worth some additional response from you. And if you want to wait to have a whole commission to talk about that, that's fine too. But whatever you think.
I do think there's some value in that. I mean, because the city financially has contributed at some point to both of these facilities and potentially in the future would need partnership grants. I could see if they're going after a large granting entity. I don't think we should start adding every single object that could be considered culturally important in here. But the two that are listed with the History Museum and the Historical Railway kind of being part of our
Property.
yeah, and historic components, I think those would make a nice fit.
I just wanted to add that because the nut of what I heard, both the city council commissioners and discussions that we've had in the past, is if you're looking to get things completed holistically so that when someone comes to Coos Bay and there is a centerpiece and branding of what we have to offer, Oregon Tourism Commission and those other types of grants are going to be more feasible because we have included things that are open to the public. They're on historic Highway 101, so there's a lot of things. Oregon State Parks just celebrated their 100th anniversary of state parks, so I think including these items in there and getting feedback on them tie into some of the urban renewal projects that we've done in the past and funds that we have used for the benefit of the community and for people outside our community. And that way I think we have a better opportunity. For example, if we wanted to get some kind of grants, like Land Water Conservation Fund, we're looking at things that are restoring waterfronts and access to water, and that's also echoed in the score. There's a lot of, not everything, but the railroad, some of these things from the old city of Marshfield are on the waterfront, and they're able to be multimodal. They're able to be accessible. So I think keeping them in here is a positive thing, because the city's going to have to address issues with them one way or another, whether they own them or not.
And in referencing to the discussion that we've had numerous times about along the boardwalks of the Front Street plan that has been done, in connecting some of those assets along there, I think including the assets in there now, if we go after some granting to continue the boardwalks and to do some of the improvements along there, it will be important to have assets.
The planning commission has been working on that for quite a while now.
So I think our consensus is to leave these two assets in here, but be maybe a little wary of adding any additional ones.
All right, it was suggested to me that the Dolphin Theater be considered as well, but I'm just putting it out there.
Let's have that as a question in our next meeting.
Okay. I will do that. Great. Okay, the next chapter 3, slide 8 is called The Framework for the Future. And we talk about, how council has really led this and has come up with, the vision to go ahead and make this happen. They have a lot of goals that are kind of intertwined with one another, and this certainly falls into what they'd like to see about, collaboration and partnerships and new opportunities for people to enjoy our city. There were a lot of themes that were identified throughout the Appendix A, that are also included under the community vision. But the meat of this chapter is really, if you go to the next slide, is chapter 9. Page 9, section 3.3. And this is probably a section which you should hold off until November 3rd as well. But we identified 4 key goals in this plan, and then each goal had a series of objectives. The goal is the big picture. The objectives are how to get to the end product that you saw when you had that goal. So that's basically, before the appendices, that's pretty much the balance of the document itself until you get to the funding options. But this piece, I think a full commission would probably benefit from looking at all of these. And if there's any wordsmithing, it could be universal with all of you. So, but I defer to your judgment on that, how you want to handle that.
I think I agree with that. I think it'll allow us on November 3rd, by having these very specific items to review, it'll allow us to get through those and
Okay.
we'll get through the rest of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and the goal and objective format is used with a lot of people you're going to go after funding with, and if you can tie them very specifically, it makes it easier for someone other than, just putting, we want to do this, this, and this, but there has to be an outcome. And I think focusing on that with the goal and then what the objectives and or outcomes are is really important.
What I'd like to do is, if we're going to hold this off until discussion on November 3rd, this is the kind of stuff that people, rightly so, like to wordsmith, because words matter, and sometimes if you don't frame things exactly the way you want them, it can be problematic later. So if you do have suggestions on some of these, the way these are worded, I'm more than happy to take those, and then I can include them in the next round that you look at on November 3rd. So, offers open.
I would like to make a suggestion, since these very important items, the 2.4.1 and 2, and this section here that starts at basically all of chapter 3, would you agree, Carolyn? If it would be helpful to send this packet or remind people again to review and read specifically these sections And if they have any changes or anything, put them in so that we can keep track of them, because it will help expedite getting in, so we're not just feeding off of throwing ideas on the wall. That would be my suggestion.
I'd be happy to do that. If we're going to meet again on the 3rd, if I could get the comments by, say, in a week or 10 days, that'd be very helpful, because I want to get this out to you again timely before the next workshop. So if there's no more on that, I'd like to go on to slide number 10. And this talks about public and private funding options. And this section is basically a description of a variety of fund types. The Appendix C that will be added to this will identify specific grant programs. Coco mentioned the Land Water Conservation Fund grant. That's just one of many through a variety of agencies that we will identify. We did this in the Front Street blueprint, and it was super helpful as we move forward to try to get grants for the work that was identified in that plan. There's a whole chapter identifying all the different grant resources, the deadlines, the criteria, the priorities, agencies. So we'd like to do that here as well. So 2 years, 5 years from now, people can pick this up and go, okay, this is the year we're going to go after this, that, or the other grant. So, well, that's all I have. But the direction I have is to come back to you with pieces of the document regarding the objectives, and also regarding the potential to include the Dolphin Theater as a cultural resource, as a non-city owned piece of property, and then also to include the sections on each one of the park facilities and cultural resources owned by the city. So at our next meeting, I will be focusing in on that. I feel like I've gotten pretty good direction on the balance of the plan. So unless I missed something, does it sound like we're good to go again on November 3rd?
I think I have two questions. One, I think if we are going to discuss some of the funding options and some of the directives, it would be nice to know for that 422, 200,000, that parks budget, how that's broken down. Since we don't typically participate in the budget meetings, how much is maintenance and things like that. I think that would be beneficial so that we can truly see that there is no money for any assets. It's basically all goes to employment. But I think it would be helpful to see that information. And then I believe when you came to council, I think there were 9 questions that were asked. Do you want to touch on the conclusion of those questions?
Oh, I didn't bring that with me, but basically, Jennifer, help me out here. They, I apologize.
No, I'm trying to find the email that,
She's scrolling her notes right now.
trying to find the email, Carolyn, where we documented what happened.
Yeah, one of the things that they wanted us to do, which I did do in this draft, was consult with the tribes regarding their cultural resources, which I did, and there is new language in here in that regard. The second thing that I asked them to comment on was a more expanded reference to the Front Street improvements and the connection to the new boardwalk and overlooks, and ultimately the Coos Museum boardwalk. And they stepped back from that and said, we've already got the Front Street blueprint. You don't need to include that in this plan. The third thing that they commented on was the potential to talk about in the plan a future westerly boardwalk along the Halloween Place area and that undeveloped property at the end of Newmark, but they declined to include that. I'm trying to think, Jennifer, I think that's
another
3 or
urban renewal
4.
area.
I think those were the, I'd have to get back to you on the other ones, but those were the ones that are jumping out in my memory right now.
Yeah, Carolyn, I would suggest that maybe we take your 6 questions and we capture the council's comments and we send them out in an email. How about that?
Yeah, that totally works.
Okay.
We recap that and we've already got it written. We'll just get it to you guys.
I had a question, Carolyn, if you can refresh my memory. So if the public hearing is going to be the latter part of November or the first part of December?
The public hearing for the Parks Commission is at this time scheduled on November 17th.
Okay, so
The
the additional chapters, I think, that were remaining in this was, the only other one that has the detail is chapter 6, was that correct?
Well, we have 3 chapters, so are you
Was that
talking
what-
about?
We combined them, never mind, so that's what chapter 3 is.
Yeah.
We combined chapter 6, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's the expansion of the funding, the addressing the parks, adjusting the objectives, and
was there a maintenance thing, or is that under our goals and objectives, right?
that's under the goals and
Okay,
objectives.
so we got it. Okay, thank you.
Those are the big pieces. All right, and I'm going to be tapping into Jennifer's expertise to get you that budget. Maybe that can come from their shop. She and Greg work on that. So,
Sounds good.
okay, I think we have it.
Choose the document from the budget.
Am I missing anything? Is there anything else?
Any additional commissioner questions?
Yeah, I think if we just use the page, because I am on the budget committee, there's a page during the course of the budget committee hearing that we had in April, and it has the current budget that was approved and passed under Public Works, and it shows under the Public Works budget what is allocated to parks. So if we could just add that in, would that be sufficient? Because that's the budget.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily saying it needs added into the document. I think while we're having that funding conversation, it would be nice to have.
We could put it as an appendix though, because then later if they want to know in a grant, how much money do you guys have? We at least have a starting point that this is, like you said, because the intent is, what do we have in our budget now and what are we spending it on? Because under Public Works, you have
Right.
sewer.
The parks budget's been minimal
Yeah.
since '89.
But I think if that's okay, if we could just add that as an appendix, I don't think it's more than 1 page, if I recall, because we don't have to include the part about
Right.
the,
And Coco, that's the fiscal year 23, 24? The current fiscal year.
just that 1 page, if we add in the appendix,
Right.
the budget for, when it comes under, let me see here,
It would be Appendix E.
funding sources,
Okay.
3.4, because it says funding options for consideration are limited in scope, only be used to fund certain things. Appendix C provides specific grants. Could we add to that our current fund, approved budget for parks is X, and then just have that be with Appendix C A or something like that?
Yeah, we could call it Appendix
Okay, because I think it's only 1 page, because there's mainly
E1. Yeah. Okay.
personnel and
And-
expenses and,
Just for my clarity, and
okay.
because when I call Emerald, I'm gonna ask for. Am I asking for the 2022, 2023 budget, or the upcoming?
No, the
fiscal
one
year?
that we just approved in April,
Okay, so 2023.
and then we just
Okay.
can add that under 3.4. So later on, from a starting point, if someone wanted to know, because I don't think that budget's changed in terms of allocation of what's done in it in a long time, because most of Public Works is the Taj Mahal, so.
Okay. Well, that's the page I will ask for.
It is,
Great.
it's a cool, I think it's great. It's a nice sewer plant. Go look at some of the people that still have 3-stage open air plants.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I think unless there was something else you needed, I think I've captured everything, and I'll go back and listen to the tape again and make sure I didn't miss anything, but good discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carolyn. Thank you for your work.
See you next time.
Well,
Bye.
that was a compliment. Taj Mahal
I'm
is
just giving
beautiful.
you a bad
That's
time.
a beautiful one, and it doesn't smell.
Oh, I like to hear that.
So any additional commissioner closing comments? Beth?
I was just wondering if the people, this is my first time I've seen this, and it'd be nice to go proofread it before the next meeting, so if you could open up the door to the other people to come and pick one up instead of mailing it,
Yeah.
that would be really,
Yeah,
Important.
that gets expensive.
yeah.
That's part of
besides-
the budget probably.
Oh, I know, but I appreciate having it printed out so we can go
Yeah.
home and stay it.
Because once you have your public hearing, you have to give the public so much time by notice. And if you want to get it done by the end of the year, we're kind of getting to that.
We are, which is why I think the 3rd will be a good meeting,
Okay.
especially since we can kind of focus on the chapters that are the meat and potatoes that we really care about.
Yeah.
Coco, any additional comments?
No, it was just I will say this, if anyone is planning on running for office or getting information, go sit down at the farmer's market and slap a table up with the city of Coos Bay if you really want to get a feel for what people think. And it was an eye-opener.
Honestly.
It was an eye-opener, and it was very interesting because I had chairs that people could sit on, and there was kids, there was a lot of people with strollers. The demographics in the town are changing. There's a lot of new people that have moved in here, and the biggest issue is people don't know what Coos Bay has and what Bunker Hill has and what Charleston has. They just put it all together as Coos Bay. So I think if nothing else, branding what is yours, like most cities have even a sticker on things like that picture right there, so people know this is the city of Coos Bay, because everybody just assumes Charleston and all these other things, and it has nothing to do with the city of Coos Bay. Not that we're not part of the community, but I think that's important for budgeting, that people know this is your city, this is what your city is doing. And a lot of people get really confused with East Side and Bunker Hill.
And you're going Coos Bay, North Bend, Coos Bay, North Bend, as you're going down
Well,
the
that
same
part,
street.
yeah, but I mean, in terms of parks and amenities, and then you
Yeah.
get a lot of feedback, why don't you have this and this and this, and they're talking to me, I'm going, we don't have showers, and then there are more and more people living in RVs, trailers, and living in boats on the water, and they're looking for amenities that other entities provide, like the port. The city of Coos Bay doesn't have that because I'm not an expert on the moorage issues there, but I don't know that you have moorage for living, but I don't know.
That was a very lengthy conversation we had before, and it cannot be used for living because those docks were put in by a Division of State Lands grant. I
Well,
believe.
Division of State Lands and the Marine Board, Division of State Lands has authority. So there's a lot of really restrictive things, but again, if you walk down on the boardwalk, there's a thing that says moorage agreements, it's a metal box, it's empty.
Yeah. Part of that, we do part of that, the port does.
Yeah,
So
and
it
the
gets
port-
real messy.
The biggest thing I heard was, you need to brand who you are and what you're doing, because you don't have control over the other entities in this community that may not want to play in your sandbox, and I'll leave it at that.
Bill, any additional comments? Okay, thank you. I appreciate, okay.
I did come for public comment.
Okay,
so
yes, my apologies.
That's okay. Works, I just wanted to see. So when we looked at, the cemetery was originally, just because Carolyn didn't know, was left out. So we have made some changes or something. It could be edited. So if you can take that and review it.
Yes.
And look at what you'd like to add and what you wouldn't. One of the important things for grant funding is that the name is directed from the State Register of Historic Places to National Register. That's really important. So we wanted to do that. Also, do do we need to put together some funding sources that you might not be aware of because it's a historic cemetery and it does have that big educational component? That's a question.
I think that would be great
Yes.
to add to the appendix
If
of
you're doing
funding
that.
sources.
And then the last one, another issue was the South 10th Street Pirate Park. Didn't even get molded. So, would you like Stacy Belton to, she has a list that was on the to-do list from the city originally. Would you like her to put something in that same format and submit that for your approval, whatever?
I think we have it, but if she wants to.
There's nothing in there about it. It just states what was done. It doesn't have that to-do list.
Stacy's more than
That's
welcome
the
to send
one
that on.
didn't. Okay, I think, unless there's any other questions from you.
No, we appreciate it. It's an all hands on deck to get this done because it is a monumental task, so.
Glad to do.
And the more we can get done before our next meeting and update this would be really helpful.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate everyone being here today. Any staff comments?
I just have, if anybody needs anything printed up before next meeting, you can get a hold of Greg, Emerald, myself. We'd be happy to print it up. You guys have our email addresses. Just email us and we'll get it printed up and put it at the front counter. And then I think this kind of weighs in, the Coos Watershed is having a IV pool Saturday, the 22nd, this Saturday from 12 to 4. So if you guys are interested, it might be raining, but that's okay.
It's supposed to be
Did
ready.
I say Mingus Park? Sorry, at Mingus Park.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Right above the swimming pool.
Right above the swimming
And I
pool.
told them already that if it's raining, I'm gonna sit in the truck with the windshield wipers watching them work.
Okay, so you're gonna be there.
I have a meeting in Reedsport till noon, so.
Well, it starts at noon.
Yeah, but I'm in Reedsport by noon, so I'm.
It goes till 4.
I know.
They're driving down.
It's fine.
Anyways, that's all.
And ODAT is coming to the cemetery on November 12th. They did the boardwalk, so they were coming. And it is historic cemetery month, and October is listed. So I'll submit the press release from Curry Hill at the state to the world and see what they do. And also mention other things that we're doing in October for that. Tie in with what we're doing.
Thank you so much. Well, we appreciate everyone coming in today and we will conclude our meeting. Thank you.
There's some extra things over here.
Thank you.